listening to She Shield, your one-stop pod for all topics personal safety. I'm your host, Sofia, and my goal is to help educate women and men on concealed carry, martial arts, and all topics self-defense. Before we start today, please take a moment to rate the podcast. I try to give this reminder every episode. It takes a few seconds, and if this is your first episode, what a lovely one to start out on. We have an incredible guest speaker today. Welcome. This episode is sponsored by Big Tex Ordnance, your soon-to-be favorite retailer for all of your firearms needs. BTO believes in only selling high-quality gear for responsibly armed citizens, as well as providing pre- and post-sale support. BTO values firearms training and supports firearms instructors nationwide. They even pay for their own staff to train with high-level instructors to ensure that when you as the consumer reach out, you are taken care of. Today, we have Todd Fox of Tour Protection on the podcast. I just had a lovely chat with Todd before this episode, and the whole time I just wish we'd recorded that discussion because it was so lovely. So, Todd, I would love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Todd Fox. In the context of this particular podcast, I'm a Marine, a former SWAT guy, a former MMA guy, a current BJJ competitor, fourth degree black belt. I run and own a protective security company called Tour Protection. It's actually called Close Protection Group, but most people refer to it as the website name, tourprotection.com. I spend my life and have spent the last 30 years traveling around the world protecting people and fighting.
Just so casual. Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you're here. You're also an author, and this is really exciting. This is the first time we've done an episode like this, but we're actually going to have two parts, not recorded the same day. Today, we are getting to know Todd. We're going to talk about some incredible topics, like his background in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, private security, and also how to apply all of that to kind of modern day combatives, to civilian and maybe even some law enforcement stuff. But we're going to come back and discuss his book called The Underpinning, and your other few books. Would you like to take a moment to talk about your career as an author, because in part two, we will cover those books once I read them and come back with notes and questions.
Yeah. I look forward to that. That'll be good because you'll come back with a different mindset than how this particular podcast goes. But I've written 5 books, mostly on use of force, defensive tactics, mindsets, ideology, stuff like that. And the current book that's out, Underpinning, which looks like something like this right here, if people are watching and not listening, is a book that basically is aimed at MMA guys and BJJ guys who are teaching active law enforcement combatives, which is known as defensive tactics, or any element of use of force. So it basically gives them an idea of the case laws, constitutional law, statutes, agency policies, the context in which force is applied in modern day American law enforcement. Because when they go in cold and they try to apply just a straightforward BJJ or Muay Thai or whatever technique, doesn't work out the same way as it does when you have 30, 40, 50 pounds of kit on, you're pinned up against a patrol car or inside it, you're dealing with 2 or 3 people, things change. And then obviously all of the restrictions that they face are very different. So this book is essentially a primer for people that don't have that background. So I come from the military and law enforcement. Even with that, I can't teach law enforcement the things that I did in the military because we have different rules and laws, and vice versa. So this book is all about that. It's called Underpinning, Foundational Concepts in Force Instruction, and it's just that. It's teaching guys who are force instructors, defensive tactics instructors, combatives instructors who are teaching American police how to better do that, understanding kind of the context that they're working within, but also all of the things that underpin what it is that they're doing for a job. So that's the focal point right now. The other books I think maybe are a little bit more niche than that, and maybe for your audience, a book that kind of falls in line with what you're already doing is this book is called Protection for and from Humanity. And that gets into all kinds of concepts of protection. So although I do protective service operations, this book is really aimed at normal, everyday people, how to think, how to look at stuff, how to do assessments, how to improve your environment and manipulate components or elements in your environment. So I think those are probably the two most pertinent book relative to our conversation today and to your listeners and viewers.
Absolutely. How exciting. It's been interesting as a civilian going to classes like ECQC where, we have our mix of military, law enforcement, civilian, and seeing how the instructor will explain certain moves in the context of, what we're most likely to encounter. And so I'm excited to gain that perspective from you without having to go and be a police officer myself. Not that that's, a complete replacement, but like you said, it will prime me going forward and help with my perspective. So I'm super excited to dive into that and come back and actually be able to speak on it. But just, it just sounds like a wonderful opportunity. So if you all are interested in looking into that in the meantime and want to read along with me and come back for part 2, everything will be listed in the show notes, which are the notes below the podcast title. So I'd love to hop in first, Todd, and just hear your background, like the origin story, how you got into this world of protectorship and now mentorship, with your life as an author and coming on podcasts and sharing, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Midwest and had a pretty traditional Midwestern childhood. Early on, I got into fighting martial arts and wrestling, and I found that it's a way to solve problems, right? So whether that be internal, meaning physical fitness and mental focus, things like that, or, in the old days and in my time, we saw a problem between different guys that way through physical means, and it worked very well. So I became the guy in my school that if you had a problem and you thought someone was going to do something to you, that you'd come and find and ask to work out that problem so you didn't get attacked. So that started probably like 6th, 7th grade. So this has always been a thing for me early on. My parents were aware of it at the time, and I paid the price for that a few times as well. But that's kind of where it started. So that led me to decide to go in the Marine Corps. I was much more interested in shooting and fighting and driving and traveling and doing those things than I was at the time in going to school, right, and going to college. So, my family said, hey, you really need to think about going to college instead of this. And I said, nope, that's not where I'm at right now. Let's do this thing. And they reluctantly agreed to sign the papers when I was 17 and graduated from high school and went in the Marine Corps. And I got a really kind of diverse experience in the Marine Corps, and that I had a bunch of different jobs. So my primary MOS or job in the Marines was infantry, but I got to do a bunch of different, what we call B billets, like secondary duties. And one of them was a Joint Task Force 6 with the DEA. So I got to do that. And that was very cool working, the outside of counter narcotics. And then I got to be a motion picture liaison in LA, working on the set of films like The Bourne Identity, where you're teaching guys how to walk and talk and act and do that kind of stuff. So that's extremely unusual. And then I had really horrible jobs like washing dishes in a mess hall and, going and working recruiting duty, which was not a great fun job. So I got to do a lot of different things, had a lot of experiences. And then while I was in the Marine Corps and I was at Camp Pendleton, I was training at Hickson's Gracie's Academy in Los Angeles. So he had a lot of famous people coming and going because at the time in particular, Hickson was known as the best fighter in the world and the most famous Gracie. And while I was teaching, we had actors and musicians and directors and producers coming and going. And a guy came in and wanted to train with somebody who had an NHB background. So NHB is kind of the predecessor of MMA, right? So no holds barred NHB. And I was the only guy in the gym at the time that had done NHB. And so I started training with him and giving him lessons. And he started dating Madonna, and they had a kid together. And then when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, he's like, hey, come work with us. You know, you can take care of our family and whatever. And I went and, in Marine Corps uniform, went and did an interview at his house in Beverly Hills with Madonna. So that kind of started the entertainment side. Prior to that, my protective background was only down in Mexico, taking people on business meetings and vacations. I'm a Spanish speaker, so that kind of lent itself to that. And then I went to work for Madonna, and that kind of opened up a lot of opportunities. And that once they saw that name on the resume and you're connected to that network of people, we picked up a ton of entertainers. So my business in 2024 is 80% entertainment, so films on location, music tours, traveling around the world. 20% is kind of split 10 and 10, which is like executive or dignitary type people, and then governmental, which is mostly training and consulting and assessments for state and federal governments.
Wow, what an interesting background. The whole time I was just like taking it all in and grinning. I mean, what an incredible life it sounds like. And
lucky guy.
I wonder, say it again.
Just a lucky guy, you know, to get exposure early on and have access to all these different things.
Absolutely. When you say you interviewed Madonna, do you mean you interviewed her for your work, or you were there on behalf of an interview she had to protect her?
No, interviewed with her, meaning that I was the subject and she was interviewing me. So Guy Ritchie at the time, so Guy was the one that I was training. So Guy Ritchie wanted to do jiu-jitsu when she was traveling. So he had to go on, I don't know if he had to, but he decided to go on tour with her. And we were doing music tours and films at the time, but he wanted to carry mats, jiu-jitsu mats to Tommy and train. And so what that meant is, you know, for him, if I hire this guy as part of the protective detail, so he's always inside that protection detail, I'll always have a built-in jiu-jitsu training partner. And so he had to get her approval because it was her budget. At the time, Guy didn't have the money that he does now, but it would be on her dime. So I had to go and interview, you know, in Beverly Hills at her house with her. And I literally just I was in Marine Corps uniform at the time that I was interviewing with her, which hindsight wasn't a smart thing because she's not pro-military. So I have to give the disclaimer that, you know, my clients have a very specific ideology, and I don't always share their ideology. And she's one of them that, you know, says and does stuff that's not in alignment with the military or law enforcement or guys that have my background. They need them to protect them, but they don't support them from other components or aspects. So that's how I ended up being interviewed by Madonna, was Guy bringing me in and her having to sign off on me. Because, you know, you think about it, this person's going to be in your daily life. They're going to be riding your car. They're going to be sleeping in your house a lot of times. They're going to be with your children. They're going to know who, you know, you're talking to, what you're talking about, where you're spending your money. If you're doing anything that's maybe not above board, they're going to know about that. So you want to have, like, you know, first right of refusal on a person saying, no, this is not a good fit for me. So I appreciate you want to do jiu-jitsu, Guy, but I don't think this guy's good. So that's what that was about.
Absolutely. You know, that makes total sense. We got to talk about this a little bit before the episode started. And I know, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm not very familiar with Hollywood, and
good for
I don't
you.
keep up with celebrities.
Congratulations.
There are a few celebrities, like I know I mentioned Numi Rapace, just because she plays this private security guard in a movie, and it definitely like romanticizes the whole process. It didn't sound like what you kind of described. Not that there aren't, you know, I'm sure lovely parts to the job. I just mean like the whole movie is like just badassery, no downtime, you know. And so we talked about some of those misconceptions today. I would love for you to share some of that with the listeners, because that's a world that we don't get to see. And we also, it's not one that, I talked about like, oh, it'd be so cool to shadow you, but that's not realistic. You can't, like a physician, you can't just go and follow someone around has such an important job like that. So would you be willing to kind of let us in on that dynamic?
I'm willing to disappoint you. It's not so sexy. So whatever you see on TV or in film, it's not how the job works. So the way, as a broad stroke, that protective service operations work is you build a network, you build a structure to function or operate within. So the majority of it is planning and organizing and structuring this apparatus to protect an individual or a group of people. So that means you're dealing with air, you're dealing with ground transport, you're dealing with hotels, you're dealing with cars, you're dealing with friends and family, you're dealing with venues, whether it's a performance event or a speaking event, you're dealing with restaurants, you're dealing with all kinds of things. And you're structuring it in a way that reduces the risk of a specific attack to a specific person. And then you're creating, primary, secondary, tertiary goals or objectives to hit when you're there on that site and how you can respond or mitigate risk. So the vast majority of it is choreography, right? You're planning and setting up this thing, and then a small percentage is carrying it out. So you're actually doing the thing, and then an even smaller percentage is you dealing with a problem inside that environment. And most of the problems are related to ego, right? So you have the ego of the artist or the diplomat or politician or whoever it may be. And then you have the ego of the security team. So if you're a team leader in a security team, you have to manage the attitudes and egos of all the people working with and around you. And so that's your team. And then you have to manage the staff of the protectee, which is a whole nother set of problems, right? So they bring their personalities into the environment and you have to deal with it. So that's what the majority of the job is, right? It's logistics in a nutshell. And then, you see on TV or, at a movie, you see something like shooting and fighting and driving, which we all train to, right? So we train to a very high standard for shooting, for driving, for fighting, for breaching, for assessments, for whatever it is. But in reality, you don't do that a lot, right? Because if you do the job right, it doesn't happen, right? And then when it does happen, your mechanisms the layers of security that you had in place fail. You are able to put some other thing in place to basically give you time to escape, right? So the primary job is to get that person out of harm's way. It's not to stay and have a gunfight, right? That's not the job. The job's the opposite, right? So this is the common misconception. So we prevent it from happening. When it does happen, we try to get away. And if we can't get away, there's a fight. And so it looks in some ways much more complex, but some ways kind of the current federal mantra for active shooter, which is run, hide, fight. We do that. So instead of hiding, you'd be barricading, right? And then once they breach a barricade, then the fight's on. So, that's less than 1% of the time. 99+% of the time, you do the choreography, nothing happens, and then you move on. And so the real danger is probably complacency more than anything else. Because nothing happened, you assume nothing's going to happen in the future, and that's a really bad spot to be in as a protector.
Absolutely. And do you see that applied? Do you see your training applied in your personal life as well, as far as, the way you protect yourself when you're out in public, or maybe if you're with your peers? Is that something that you apply?
Yeah, I think it carries over to that, because you start to see things a certain way. You start to look at things a certain way, and because you've applied it in the majority of your life, in my case, 30 years, but also if I'm out in a foreign country, let's say I'm in foreign countries 9 or 10 months out of the year, I'm doing it every day, right? And because I do it every day, it just becomes part of who you are and how you see things. And so how you walk into a room, like how your eyes sweep and what you look at, like if you're looking at hard corners, or you're looking deep in the room for something specific, or you're looking for a bathroom or a safe haven or a rear door or whatever, you're going to do those same things naturally because they don't really take that much time or energy, and it's wired into you already. And so you're going to start to think about stuff and look at stuff through the same lens, probably not to the same degree. Let's say, working, I've got a certain type of shoe on that I'm wearing so I can perform a certain task, and I'm carrying a certain type of gun in a certain location so I can do a certain thing if things go bad. But maybe as a private citizen in a low threat environment, now I'm wearing flip-flops and I'm carrying a much smaller, low caliber gun, and I'm not carrying 3 extra magazines or something like that. So you can reduce that, assuming that you're well familiar with your environment. And, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to get all kitted out to go to the beach, right? So I'll adjust and acclimate to the environment that I'm in, but I will always bring over skills and ideas and the lenses of a protector. It's part and parcel. I don't think you can unwire that. I can lessen it, but it doesn't go away.
That makes it makes a lot of sense. And I'd love to, if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of pivot to the training that has led you to where you are now. We've talked about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What other forms of training have you done?
Are we talking about martial arts, or are we talking about full spectrum, like shooting and driving?
It's full
and
spectrum,
all that kind of stuff?
from knife control concepts all the way to, driving. Mm-hmm.
Well, I wasn't allowed to go to Aaron Genetti's course because he said I didn't have a beard, and he mandated having at least a 6-inch long beard. So if you don't have a beard, you're not qualified to do Aaron's course. That's
so true. Yeah, I did have to wear a fake one.
No, he's a good dude. So
he's great.
For the protective side, it's a little bit different than the fighting side. They're very different things. And in fact, on the protective side, I don't want to be fighting anybody. And the reason I don't want to be fighting anybody, I don't want to be doing jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or boxing or wrestling, is because if I'm doing that, I'm engaged with somebody who's protecting the client, right? You don't want to peel off the client, especially if you're doing close protection and you're on the principal, right? You're what they call AIC or agent in charge or something like that. So you don't want to be fighting. And on top of that, most of the clients that we have are very, very high net worth individuals. And if I go and I engage someone in some type of physical altercation, what I've just done is acted as an agent on behalf of my client. And who do you think they're going to go after to get money from? So the fighting component is good and it's for an emergency, but it's not something that we do in the regular job. So what normally occurs is you go and you get training relative to assessments. So assessments are the thing you do on the front end. So the very first thing protectors do is they collect data, and you get these data points that will kind of drive the direction you go for operations with that particular entity. So I will find out, like, who is Sofia's followers? Like, who are they as a group collectively? What are the demographics, male, female, ages, could be religion or political ideology. What kind of things happen at events where Sofia's at? Do they have fighting? Do they have protests? Do they have crowd surfing and moshing? Do they have, attempts to grope Sofia? Like, what things do people do, good and bad? What can I expect, right? Because I'm trying to establish what is normal, and then how do I deal with the anomalies that are not normal, right? So I identify them, and then I'm able to put whatever plan into place. So that's the first thing. So you collect the data, you meet with managers and agents and attachés and people like that, and start to talk through it. And you start to figure out who the principal is, what goes on around him, who are the key people, what does the day look like? What does a month look like? How do they move? And are they flying on a private jet? Are they getting an S500 Mercedes, picking them up at every airport? Do they have a local team that they utilize when they're in country, whether it's an assistant or a protection team? You figure all that stuff out, and then you start to do assessments. So there's 3 types of assessments that we do: a risk assessment, a vulnerability assessment, and a threat assessment. So there are 3 different things. So the risk assessment would be very specific incidents. Like I say this person doing some type of physical attack with a firearm or a bomb or a VBIED or something like this. And I figure out, looking at their history, the information that I have, what is the likelihood, the percentage likelihood of that thing occurring and being successful. So I look at that, and that helps me to understand where I need to focus my manpower and also my finances. So I look at that risk assessment, I present to the client, explain how and why, and say, we should put X amount of dollars here, we should put X amount of staff here because of these factors. Then we do a vulnerability assessment, right? A vulnerability assessment focuses on the chink in the armor, right? Meaning that there's a weakness, right? So let's say I have a client who's a gambler. That's a weakness. Let's say I have a client who utilizes, services from ladies of the night. That's a weakness, right? Let's say I have a client who uses drugs. That's a weakness. So these vulnerabilities open up exposures that otherwise we wouldn't have, right? So a common one, because I've dealt with this before, is let's say we create this structure, the security structure, this bubble, and it has layers of security in it. And this person has some type of credential. It can be anything, right? So like, you need this pass to get through to this sanctum sanctorum, this inner area that's super protected. And I give this pass to the wife of the protectee, and she's a cocaine addict. And then she goes outside and trades that pass for cocaine. And now this random person who sold her cocaine has this access. So that is a vulnerability. The vulnerability isn't the structure. The vulnerability is that person. So we go and identify what are the vulnerabilities. It can be a physical vulnerability, like smokers present a common vulnerability. They go out secured doors, they prop the doors open with like a rock or a chair or something like that. They're smoking, they're texting, they're talking, they go back inside and leave the door open. So that otherwise secure door now is a vulnerability for our security physical structure. So, people, places, things like that. Right now, if we're operating in the Middle East, and I have a client that is pro one side or the other, that can become a vulnerability. Let's say it happens a lot where, let's say I'm operating in South Africa, and I have one guy on my team who is fighting against a group of people, and another guy on my team who's, let's say, a driver, and he was, for the opposition. And now these two guys who were fighting each other, literally fighting each other with guns, are now on the same team. And I have to figure out what vulnerabilities that presents our total structure. So that's another one. And then obviously the threat. So we have the threat is the most obvious, what you kind of think about when people talk about assessments, right? What that threat can be, whether it can be, terrorism related, like flying planes into a building, or it could be, suicide bombers, or it could be a threat actor, it could be a person that's crazy, it could be a person that, let's say, is a stalker, like what you and I talked about with some of the female situations where someone's stalking them and they can't have them, so they don't want anybody to have them, and so they're gonna go identify that person and try to execute them. So, threats are different. So vulnerabilities, risk, and threats are the assessments that we do on the front end. So that requires training, that requires a system, that requires a specific lens for you to look at the problem through. And then you start to get into the other things that you think about relative to protectors, right? So protective and evasive driving. So we spend a ton of time in cars, right? Do you know how to drive these cars to their thresholds? And what happens when someone's shooting at you and you're under stress and you have auditory exclusion and tunnel vision and loss of fine motor skills and pooling of the blood to the chest? Can you still operate that motor vehicle the same way? Or what about when they're chasing you and it's raining or there's a lot of traffic? Can you get out of being pinned in? How are you dealing with rounds hitting the car? Is it a ballistic vehicle? Meaning, does it have some type of armor? That changes the weight of the car and how the car functions, right? Also, the protocols inside the car, for example, you don't roll down the windows in up-armored vehicles, right? Because then the bad things get inside. But naturally, if you're not used to working in up-armored vehicles, you may do that. Even getting pulled over, we use signage that we post up signage on the door to let police that may have pulled over this armored vehicle hey, this is an up armored vehicle. It has XYZ, whatever, call this number and we can communicate that way, or we can go to the police station or whatever it may be. So training relevant to those kinds of things. Then you get into the shooting training, right? So I'm not on the protective side working as a sniper, right? I'm not trying to shoot somebody from the wood line at 1,500 meters. I'm up close and personal. And so, that kind of thing is more pertinent. Fighting in close quarters combat. You and I talked about this. When you're fighting close quarters combat, let's say a concert with 20,000 people, you can't take a level shot. You're going to have to go up. And so that can be something as simple as kneeling. If you take a knee and shoot up at a 45-degree angle, that trajectory maybe won't be passing through anybody else. So specific training to the things that we do. I mentioned breaching, right? So how do I get into a hotel room to secure my client? Or how do I get out of being taken captive? How do I get out of cuffs or duct tape or zip ties or whatever it may be? Or how do I secure a door in a hotel room when we're under attack? What do I use on the locking mechanisms? So those kinds of trainings are, I wouldn't say common, but those are in the wheelhouse of what it is that we do. And then last is what I do full time, which is training jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and all that kind of stuff, which is supplementary in nature from a protective perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, by the way. It's incredibly interesting to learn about when it comes to assessing vulnerabilities. Is that something you think we should do as civilians in our everyday lives, thinking about like from the top, like where am I most vulnerable? How would you say we should even do that? Like what's the mental process you recommend?
Yeah, I think people do it naturally. I think that occurs. Like if you, I know you don't, but if you had children or something and you needed a babysitter, you'd start assessing the vulnerabilities there, right? You start to look at their background and see if they had certain behaviors and things like that, because you don't want to allow that vulnerability to come into your house and create this exposure that's unnecessary. So people already do that to a certain degree. Usually the greatest vulnerability is usually human, right? Most of our problems come from humans. And so having the ability to pick apart advanced signs or warning signs or cues from a person, that's probably number one. And I think that most people have the ability to learn that. That skill can be learned by most people. You're going to have, some acumen with respect to who you are and how you've experienced life and maybe even your genetic structure as to how quick you pick it up and to what degree you pick it up. But most humans come with the ability to learn human assessment, right? And so part of that comes from programs in the military, human or human intelligence and behavioral assessment. Right now, if I was going to recommend to any civilian person training in that area, I would say Arcadia Cognerati is probably the go-to group in the United States for that training. Greg and Brian, who run that program, have done it for many, many years at the highest levels of government down to, the private citizen. But they do, human behavior analysis and recognition and things like that. And they're literally the best in the business at what they do. And now that they're open to civilians, it's great. In fact, some of you guys out there may have seen the material. A lot of the material is related to the Marine Corps Combat Hunter Program, which Greg Williams developed. And, when we talk about that program, a lot of other guys, even the guys that wrote a book related to it, took Greg's material and then utilized it as if it was their own, but it just came from that particular program that he wrote. So I do think there's a massive correlation for normal people, everyday people, to learn behavioral analysis, and that will then in turn help with assessing vulnerability, because again, most of our vulnerabilities come from people, occasionally physical, but mostly people.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. The thing that came to mind for me is when I go out to almost like a restaurant bar with friends, and I know I'm the only one in that group who is thinking about safety. And oftentimes I'll be the designated driver and almost like our little, unofficial private security of the team. And I'll be thinking about what weapons I'm carrying and, the fact that we will be around intoxicated people. So yeah, I guess that just kind of happens. Like as I'm getting dressed and picking out my outfit, I'm like, are these heels too high? Can I Spartan kick someone comfortably? You know what I mean? So, and so I think about that, and I guess I've never seen it, or I guess articulated it as assessing vulnerabilities, but, I love the way you did that and kind of talked about that. We talk about being situationally aware and, understanding our environment. But this, I feel like, takes it a step further. It's almost the preventive aspect of it, it sounds like. Would you agree with that? Are you in search of top-notch gear that exceeds your expectations? Look no further than GPS, brought to you by Go Outdoors Incorporated. GPS has been dedicated to crafting the finest products for hunting and shooting since 2002. As someone who frequents the gun range, my GPS bag is a staple to safely and effectively haul my gear. Their specialized bags are designed to keep all of my valuable equipment secure and organized. With GPS, you can experience the ultimate peace of mind. There are 3 exciting product lines: GPS Tactical, GPS Wild About Hunting, and GPS Wild About Shooting provide the perfect solution for your specific needs. So whether you're on a hunting expedition or hitting the range, GPS is your reliable companion. To choose a bag that fits your needs, use code SheetShield at checkout to save and to support the pod. That's SHESHIELD at checkout.
Yeah, I mean, prevention is it. So when we look at like even old security models that I learned before you were born, you look at deterring somebody from doing something, right? The first thing is deterrence. Well, what mechanism deters people? Is it physical presence, like a uniformed police walking around somewhere? Is it good lighting that deters them because they're going to get caught? Is it, this tall fence that they see? Something to deter an action from occurring, right? And then you want to be able to detect it when it happens, right? That's, again, preventive, because if you can detect it as it's happening, that gives you more time and space to deal with the problem. So once you got it detected, you want to have some mechanism in place to delay it, right? Because the more that you can delay it, the longer it takes them to get to you, the more time you have to develop a good response, or the higher the probability, if you have space, if you're talking about projectiles flying or things like that, the higher survival rate is for you. So, we start to build these things in, and then we get into the response. Like, what have you trained to do? If it gets up close and personal, what are your capabilities under stress? How realistic has your training been to your daily life? And I think we talked about this before. There's a lot of guys running around training now with like 75 pounds of special operations gear on, and they're fighting in these austere environments in training. But they walk around in jeans and flip-flops, and they carry, 43X and appendix, and, they're in safe environments like that. That doesn't correlate. So, yes. That's an important factor when you look at training. Like, are you training relative to the environments that you're in? But to your point, when I'm choosing clothing, it's relative to the environment. It is in context. It's congruent with where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be doing and who I'm going to be with. So if I'm building this plan for me, and now I have to take a 90-year-old person with me, I need to incorporate a 90-year-old person, because not only are they not a force multiplier for me, but now I've got to take time and energy to move that person physically myself under stress, right? They're not going to help me. They're not going to be in the gunfight with me, or they're not going to be in the evacuation with me. I have to now put my attention on that. It could be the same with kids. If you have kids, you're having to account for them. So that's an important thing. You talk about heels. I have zero experience. I've never worn heels. So you would be the subject matter expert with heels and assessing heels when you go out. But you're right. Some people are really good at running in heels. I can't imagine that I would be one of them. But when you think about that, all of these things are decisions, right? You are are basically talking about, okay, where am I going, right? So I'm going to dinner. Okay, where is the restaurant located? Is it in a nice part of town? Is it on a Monday night where nothing happens, or is it on a Friday or Saturday or Sunday night or whatever nights are hot where there are a lot of drunks around? in that particular area, what is the most common crime? I can use things like uniform crime reports that are public knowledge, and I can pull that data out and I can see what neighborhoods specific violent crimes happen in. And if I'm going to this specific restaurant, I can get online, I can start to look at certain things like what's their lighting like outside? What's the sidewalk like outside? How far is the car going to park from that front door? If I'm going to go in the front door, does it have a back door if I need to get out quick, or a side door? Are they glass windows? If something explodes, is the glass going to come in and be secondary frag? Do they have curtains that will stop that? Can I sit, in the restaurant where I can see everything that's going on, and at the same time not be next to the kitchen where people are coming and going, or next to the bathroom where people are coming and going, or next to the front door? So I think those are logical things to look at, and you start to see people in the room and look at who's in the room, who's a potential problem for you based on their behavior, how they're looking at you, what they're saying, what they're doing, what they're drinking. I think those are natural things to do if you're aware, right? Just simply aware of your environment by looking around and questioning stuff. And, people that are in tune will typically, they'll almost play a game with it, right? Like, hey, I wonder what that guy does for a living. And I'm looking at what kind of clothes he's wearing and how his posture is and where his eyes are looking and what type of hair. He's got this type of watch on. He's got this type of ring on. He's got this type of whatever. We, by and large, are birds of a feather, and we really kind of give everything away in how we look, how we comb our hair, how we cut our hair, or how we shave our face or don't shave our face, except for Aaron Janetti, which is an anomaly. So we do this, right? Like he knows I'm blasting him if you go to any of his posts, you'll typically find me in there talking trash about his beard.
I love that. I cannot wait to go see that. That's awesome.
Yeah, you'll see it. You'll see. You send him a ping. He'll tell you about it. He's got to deal with me all the time.
I will ping him. Okay.
Yeah, do it. But you see, for example, like where you're at right now, not just the state you're in, but the event that you're at right now. You're going to see 5'11". Guys are wearing 5'11" gear, and they're walking a certain way, and they've got their shirt a certain way. And it's literally like a robot. Like if you look at the clothing and behavior, it could be the same, in another realm. I mean, not tactical, but like fighters in jiu-jitsu, and they're wearing the same type of clothing. They're wearing it the same way. They're walking the same way. They got cauliflower ear. You see it over and over and
That's
over
always a dead
again.
giveaway.
If I go, like,
Absolutely.
I'm not a huge fan of hipsters, to be frank, but I love coffee, and I go to barbershops. So if you do coffee and you do barbershops, they're typically hipsters, right? So they act a certain way, they walk a certain way, they wear a certain type of clothing. So my point is that even though we think we're all special and we're all individuals, whatever, we tend to group or flock in a certain way, and that makes it identifiable. So when I walk into a room, I can tell, like, okay, those guys are all bikers, namely because they're wearing those acid wash jeans, and they've got that Harley Davidson black shirt on, and they've got a do-rag on, and they've got this specific type of glasses on, and they got grease underneath their fingers. I'm pretty sure those are bikers, right? Like, these things are given away to us for free. It's just whether we want to collect it and store it, or, include it in our plan. That's really on us. But I think you doing that, whether you're going out with your friends or family or whoever, it makes a lot of sense, and it costs nothing. It takes a little bit of energy. And if you do it a lot, like I do, it's just part of your MO, right? Like, I'm thinking through it. Where am I parking? How am I walking? What are the conditions? How many people am I going to have to pass? What kind of people can they be? What is normal? What should kind of peak a change in behavior for me? When I get in there, where do I want to sit? How do I want to be there? Do I need to organize that in advance with the manager? Do I have a friend that knows the manager or owner of the place? That's helpful, right? Because then I can select my own spot. When I'm in there, is that a place that's safe for me to be drinking, or should I not be drinking while I'm there? Is it legal to carry or not legal? And if it's not, how do I make sure that, I stay good? All that stuff. And when I get up to go to the bathroom, if I'm the chief protector of that group of people that I'm out with, what happens, right? If something happens while I'm in the bathroom, like, how will I know? And where will I go? And now I got to fight backwards to those people. So I think some people will call that paranoid. I would argue with them and say it's prepared. Like, I don't have any anxiety about it because I'm prepared, and because I'm mentally prepared, and because I've trained physically to do these things. It doesn't take extra energy for me. It just takes a little bit of extra thought. And I'm good with it. So that's what we're training people to do, and how to think and how to look at things. And, we've had good results. I would argue that it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. That's just, again, my personal opinion.
Absolutely. My best friend, she has a page for women's concealment. It's Shoot with Lisa. She always talks about how, we carry Band-Aids, not because we're afraid where we're going to cut ourselves constantly, but because it's really annoying to have a cut and have to hold the tissue there constantly. Just want to be able to cover it, protect it from, bacteria and go. And that's her number one response on her social media platforms, where she gets these wow, I can't imagine being this paranoid comment. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think there's a certain stigma to it sometimes. So I like that we're kind of pushing back against that and saying it's okay to be prepared. The other P word.
Take the incidents of occurrence, when those things do occur, who not only survives, but who thrives in that environment. And typically it's the people that have mentally and physically prepared for it. So, I have no paranoia about a fire happening while I'm in a school building or in a restaurant or whatever. Probably because since I was 2 years old, they've done fire drills 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, and there's a fire extinguisher on every single corner. But no one says, "Oh, you're paranoid about a fire occurring." It's just incorporated into the training of that school or that building or whatever. I don't think about it, and I don't have to think or worry about it because it's everywhere. And fire code has made it that way. Fire drills have made it that way. Oh, stop, drop, and roll. Oh, there's a red canister over there with this black hose sticking out. Well, I think I know what that is. It's not complicated. We make it more complicated than it needs to be. And just because a certain group of the population doesn't want to prepare, that doesn't make me paranoid. That makes them unprepared. It's pretty simple.
Absolutely. Yes. And there are two things I want to go back to what you said. First of all, it truly is never too late to learn the perspective of running in heels. If you just want to do that at some point in your life, it could give you insight to the people you protect, especially the women. And
I'll tell you what, I think you will want to be there with a camera to collect that evidence of me doing something like that, because that's going to have a lot of monetary value. Yeah, absolutely.
That's viral material. Yes. And actually just yesterday, Lena and I were at Tacovas buying cowboy boots. And for reference, for people listening, if you're what event is he talking about? I'm currently still in my hotel room post NRA show. I did not leave in time. I prioritized, networking over getting home sooner. So, I am still in, the hotel. And yes, you're so right. I actually thought there was a 511 booth because of how many men had 511 cargo pants on. I was like, ooh, where's everyone coming from? And then I looked it up on the little directory.
I want to say something that it's amazing. It's we have to dress and talk and move and carry it. It's crazy. But one thing that you failed to mention is that you've got this blue way that is, a thank you to law enforcement during Police Week. And that's pretty cool. I appreciate you doing that.
Oh, absolutely. My intentional, blue pale skin, for people who aren't watching, please go to the YouTube video, or see our highlights on Instagram and TikTok. I am just in a blue tint right now in the hotel room because I did not prepare. Exactly. Yes. And
is there a way that you can run a thin blue line across mine so at least I can do something like you've done?
Yes. 100%. We're going to throw that in for you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So we're in Lena and I are in Tacovas, and I'm trying on these boots, and I'm like, dang, my capacity for heel is anything above 2 inches, and I'm taking them off to fight, which is not really practical. It's actually, let me just say, take the really out. It's not practical for fighting on concrete, or, I could be downtown where there's broken glass. There's something, there's no time, all that stuff. And I think about that every time I buy a new pair of shoes, even though I'm 5'10", and I love to stand around 6'1" if I can. Like, I love to just be super tall. And so, that does not always work. I've learned to, I bought the boots. Okay. I bought the boots because you have to live. What's the point of all of this, you know? And I'm planning on, like, they're going to be my 2-stepping boots. So, like, if anything, I can change into them. But, like, I'm in this Takova's place, and this woman's staring at me, and she's like, "Ma'am, do you want to buy the shoes?" And I'm going through this checklist of, like, these would suck to fight in. They have no traction. I'm going to have to break them in, like, all of these things. It's just a pair of boots, right? Anyway, really funny. Since we're on that topic, I thought I would share that. But kind of pivoting back, because I could talk about heels all day. When it comes to alternative forms.
You are the SME. Zero knowledge on heels. I know nothing about heels. And
That's
now
okay.
I'm going to have to learn, I guess. And there are a lot of people out there would love to see me running in heels. So you probably got some people excited.
I don't know why. If I were a dude and I had a page, sorry, I keep hitting my mic with my hand. If I were a dude and I had a page, hear me out, for jiu-jitsu, I would totally throw on heels. I should just do that as a female, but just to gain the perspective, I would throw on a pair of heels with my gi or no gi and have at it and see how it changes the game. Why not? I'm just saying, I'm giving you a great idea.
There are dudes out there that would do that in 2024. I just don't happen to be one of them. It's not my jam. You know, whatever floats your boat, but I'm not a heel runner, so not me. I'll run in blades. You got blades, I'll run in blades.
Right. I like it. That's awesome. When it comes to alternative means of protection, what do you recommend? And I'm going to leave this very open. A good example, though, of something I run into a lot. My husband and I are metalheads. We love metal concerts. What's really cool is the people at metal concerts are so respectful. Like, from my experience, like, we're all like there, like, you know, we have that sense of unity and, you know, almost like anonymity, but we all come in under this, you know, guise of like, we love this band. And, I remember my first mosh pit. I have not mosh pitted because of my nose. I have crowd surfed, but, my husband and I were in the crowd and people started shoving each other. And I grabbed him by the shirt and I'm looking for an exit. I'm like, we're getting out of here. And he was like, "Sofia, what are you doing?" And I was like, "We're getting out of here. Like, something's going down." And he was like, "It's a mosh pit. Like, we're just accidentally in the middle. Like, we didn't see the circle." Like, I was like, "What? A mosh pit? Like, what is this thing?" And this was a very interesting situation because I had actually walked into the concert with my firearm, saw the metal detector, turned around, had to go back to my car and take off my gun. And so and no pepper spray. I didn't have my, like, non-steel blade. So I literally just had these hands and I was like, great. Like, my first fight, I have no tools. I'm just like getting my husband and I out of here. So maybe for like a situation like that or even greater, what would you recommend?
If we're talking about metal concerts, you know, the solution to that is to be in the reserve seating.
Don't go.
Not down on the floor in the general admission area. And then also to know that there's a barrier there. Yeah, but, well, it depends on where you're going, right? There are a lot of metal concerts.
Yes, that's true. I'm joking.
An arena floor, you have like a general admission where they open the floor up and they don't have any seats. Then when you get into the lower bowl is what they call it, like, you know, 200 section, 300 section, 400 section. That's my first step is I'm going to say stay away from that. But second to that, like, you start to look at some of the stuff that we talked about, right? You look at things that are in place by design, like fire safety, right? So you have things like glass breaks, right? And some of those glass breaks can be used for blunt force trauma tools. The fire extinguisher itself can be utilized to blind people, and then that's pretty heavy. You don't want to get hit in the head with one of those things. So, you know, you can use tools in your environment, assuming that you know that environment. So, like, if you're at a rock show, and you're probably going to have a barricade, you're probably going to have local security, you're probably going to have trash cans, you might have some caution tape to delineate certain areas. The layout's going to be pretty consistent. So if you learn the layout, you learn what's in those environments, you can start to figure that out. And, like, I have this tool, I know that they build stages. Well, if they build stages, they need tools. And if they have those tools, they need to be close by. They can't be far away. So I would start to look at where those tools are in that immediate area. And I could utilize that because a screwdriver is a great tool, right? At least as far as I'm concerned in defending yourself. They're going to have box cutters. Those things are going to be close to a stage all the time. Think about the stage, right? The stage is where the band members are at. But if you think about stage left and stage right, or upstage, which is behind the stage, if you think about those things, they're going to have technicians, and those techs are going to be working with what they call a road case. And those road cases, those black cases with like the edging, that steel, those cases will have tools in them 100% of the time. So literally, if you can get to one of those cases, you're going to have a tool to fight with. And if you think about, barricading, maybe you'll find places under the stage where you can barricade. So there are a lot of different things available, assuming you understand how the environment works, and then what's most likely to be in that environment, and where that thing is going to be inside of that environment. So for me, if we're talking about rock shows, I started thinking about the fire component, and I started thinking about the technician component. And I used one of those tools overseas with a very famous rock star in Eastern Europe, and it kept us from being in a really, really bad spot. So he made it national news at some point, and this was a while ago. So this country had just kind of come out of being a war zone, and we went there to perform. He performed, and I went there as security. And so we utilized those same tools I'm referencing to you to protect him when they decided they didn't like what he was doing. So, what's in your environment? And if it's part of code, most public spaces will have that same fire code in that same city. It'll change city to city. And then relative to the job that's being done, like you talk about going to a restaurant and let's say you don't have something for whatever reason. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you go to London. It's illegal to carry any type of knife on your person in London, and you can go to jail for a year, prison for a year for carrying a folder, like a 2-inch folder. But if you're at a restaurant, how do they chop food up? So you're going to have knives in the area. You're going to have chairs in the area. You're going to have glass in the area. Those are great tools to have. And they're in every single restaurant across the world, regardless of where you're at, regardless of what the laws are in that particular country. So things like fire code, things like restaurant, even cars, when you look at in cars, if you don't have something, a lot of cars have jacks, or a lot of cars have like a tire, fix a flat repair. That stuff burns like hell when it gets in your eyes. So, in every environment, there's something that you can utilize. It's just taking the time to think through it and then grab it and see how you can utilize that tool under stress, right? What does it offer you, right? It's playing with it.
Absolutely. I remember in my Korean style martial arts, the one I did in high school. Did you giggle?
Just a little. I'm giggling because I'm getting ready to put heels on.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to call Aaron Janetti first. That's the one thing we had to do is call Janetti and ask how it feels to wear heels, because we know with that beard, he's worn heels plenty of times.
Of all people to throw on heels and jump on a mat, it would be him, and I would be honored to see that.
100%.
Yeah, I'm writing him after this. So we practiced short staff form, which was like literally, just for people who don't know, literally a short, like imagine a long staff and make it short, probably about, 11 inches, ish. I don't know why I chose 11, but that's what I imagine. I guess, yeah. So the staff can be transferred as far as like the movements of the wrists and like how you orient your body and like learning where to like derive power, timing, all of that can be applied in some ways to knife fighting. And if you needed to grab like, a lamp and use that as a weapon, like you could apply it more or less. And so that was one thing from Musawan where I was like, yes, like I love my short staff form because it's all about timing and like power and like wrist motion and everything. It applied to Krav really well and things like that. So all of that to say, I remember being in high school and my phone got stolen by this girl, actually, let's be real. And she then threatened me. I went to a very seedy high school. I went to the one like 20 minutes from my house across town because they had a better orchestra program. But it was sketchy at times. And, I got threatened after I turned her in for stealing my phone. She would wait outside in the parking lot. This is like bringing back all these memories. Like she would wait for me with her group of individuals that were also very sketchy, and watch me get in my car. And I used to be like, like wave at them a little bit. Not that I wanted to taunt them, but I wanted to be like, I can see you, you know what I mean? And I remember being like, well, shit, I have nothing. I would die. I would just basically have to run away, and I'm not very fast. So I remember being like, well, I have my short staff. I have that. If I needed to grab something, in a classroom, because we did have some classes together, I could grab it and at least kind of distract her with, I don't know, pain or something. Like I just remember thinking like that as a high schooler. I may or may not have carried a knife every now and then. Did I have any business carrying said knife? No. But it made me feel a little bit better. So, I always wonder what people do. And now they sell those knives, like Black Triangle sells them, where like you can take them through, metal detectors. And, is there anything else that you've seen? Like, oh, actually at NRA recently, there was a baton that was a polymer material. So it was really light, but it was heavy enough that, it would help deliver an impact. But it wouldn't be detectable by scanning. Is there anything that you've seen that you like?
Yeah, yes, my elbows and my knees and my head. Those are the things that I like the most because they're always with me and they're very hard. So I think that's probably a good starting point. But I carry a pin with me. I have all kinds of tools. The problem is, like, if you want to deploy something, you're eating up time. And if, let's say, a quarter second or a half second counts, right? Which is the whole point of detecting something early, right? Early detection affords you time. And then that typically translates to space control, whether you're going to consume space or you're going to create space. So you have to think about it in its totality. When you deploy a weapon system, when you go to grab it or you take it out or it comes out of a sheath, or you're going to eat a quarter second and maybe more. It depends on who you are and what you have and where it's at. But I like being able to fight with what I have available to me. And where I'm going to use time to get a tool typically is when it's something outside of my capabilities. Like if it's 3 guys, it doesn't matter how good of a fighter I am, right? Like I can't do it. So I need to even the odds. And that's where, edged weapons and weapons of opportunity in the environment come into play. But I like to be able to fight with, like, let's say I have this metal pin in my hand and let's say I have access to this piece of wood that it happens to be sitting next to me, or like we talked about, a glass bottle, or we talked about a kitchen knife, or whatever it may be. So I think training on everything makes a lot of sense to me, and having the ability to think in the moment, because as you know, you get very stupid. You go from, using your prefrontal cortex to your amygdala when you're trying to make these decisions under stress. It's not easy. So the hardest part is that. And the way to overcome that is training, and start training with random environments. If this is the pin that I have, train with that pin. If this is the piece of metal that I'm going to bash inside of your head, or a rock that I'm going to do, train with it. Because you don't always get to pick. This is something I've talked about repeatedly and I've written about it as well. Think about the equation when you think about attacks, just for a second. Break it down into very simple terms. The bad guy is going to pick the time they attack you, they're going to pick the place they attack you, and they're going to pick the method of attack that they utilize. And you're going to pick the response. So they're getting 75% of the equation and you're getting 25. Here's the bigger problem. It's not just that they have 75% and you have 25. What is faster, action or reaction? What's faster?
Action.
So they get to pick the action, and they also have forethought because they're picking the time, place, and method of attack, and you're picking the response, which requires them to have already picked the time, place, and method of attack and initiate that attack. So you're going to be on your heels, and in terms of striking arts, being on your heels is the worst place to be because you're out of balance, right? That's why you want to be on your toes. That's why people say, make sure you're on your toes. So I think it's more important to understand the environment and the equation than to pick one weapon, because when you don't have that weapon available and you can't just say, okay, I'm going to transition. This is why I mentioned to you Klein's recognition prime decision making, right? Because I have these two neurons and I developed this synapse between the neurons that make this connection. And I say, oh, I can use this thing here as a device to do whatever, and I train with it. But then I don't have that. But then there's another device like this that's very similar. My brain says, hey, Todd, that thing looks similar to the other thing. Pick that up and use that. So I think it's more important in how you see it and how you train it relative to getting comfortable with only one weapon, right? It's like, if I'm only a Muay Thai guy and I get to the ground, I'm screwed. If I'm only a Jiu-Jitsu guy and the guy can fight from the outside, I'm screwed. So it's having the capability, and the first place that it starts is where everything starts when you talk about fighting. It's your brain. That's it, right? That's your tool. Utilize that first, and then everything else is an extension of it, right? When you do something like punch this guy in the face, your fist didn't make that decision to punch the guy in the face. Your brain made that decision. So what you need to condition first is your brain, because that's the most valuable thing. If you think about injuries, and we talked about us both having been injured in fighting, and me more times than I can count, and I'm getting a repair tomorrow on a fighting injury from an event. So when we think about that, if I take a bat and I break your arm, right, can you still fight? Can you still pull the trigger? Can you still stab somebody? Can you still headbutt them? Yes, you can. If you can work through that pain, you absolutely can. And the adrenaline is going to help you do that.
Oh, right. Yes.
If I do it to your leg, can you still fight? Yes, you can. Now, if I do it to your head, can you still fight? And probably not is the answer more often than not, because this is your command center. This is where everything is being decided. This is where you're launching the attack from, right? So instead of thinking in terms of what tool do I want to use, I think more in terms of what tools are available to me in a given environment. Have I trained with those tools, and what would solve this problem quickest with the least amount of problems for me? So that's more of my mindset than fixating on one tool. Like, I really like to use this one knife, or I really like to shoot them with this gun. And the truth is that most people don't get the real world reps with guns and knives and things like that. Most people have not shot somebody. Most people have not stabbed somebody. Most people have not been shot. Most people have not been stabbed. So if you train your mind first on, like, this thing could occur, right? This problem could occur for me. And if this problem occurs to me, I think this can be the solution. I'm going to go train it. And then when I get to that spot, it's known to me. It's not a new experience. And that means I'm going to have less anxiety over it as well, right? Because I don't feel overwhelmed by the circumstances, because I've already worked it out in my brain and I've already trained it as well. And so now when it happens, that response time gets shortened. And remember, that's all I have is the response time, because the bad guy picks the time, the place, the method of attack, and I'm picking the response. So my reaction is more rapid, and it's likely going to be more functional, more realistic, because I've already thought about it and trained it. So that's a long-winded answer of saying, like, I don't fixate on one tool, or like I don't look for just one tool. I'm looking around and seeing, what I have. We talked about earlier, and I don't want to get into the context of why we talked about this, but we talked about, women being accosted maybe in gyms, like fitness facilities. I'm surrounded by weights and machines and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of tools that I could utilize. Short of being in a padded room or a skiff or something like that, I don't think there are many environments that don't have tools of opportunity for fighting and self-defense. I think they're all around us.
Absolutely. All I can think about is the John Wick movies. And I know that, like, I know sometimes he goes overboard and he'll literally have a perfect knife and then he'll throw it and start running. And it's like, oh, like, do we throw the knife? I don't know. So things like that, sometimes I know it's like Hollywood and like not totally reliable. And, we know, Keanu actually trains and stuff, but, I do love those movies sometimes because of the creativity with the environment. Like, that is always, that's always really cool to see. But, whether or not it's applicable. So that's so cool to know.
You say not totally reliable. I would say totally not reliable. I would switch up that phrase a little bit. You can't, Hollywood I worked on a bunch of movies in Hollywood, and they used to always tell me, like, yeah, that's great, but what would you do in reality? I'm like, this is what I would do in reality. Like, yeah, but that doesn't look really good on camera, and it's really short, and it's something.
Yes.
I said, but you asked what I would do in reality, and you want authenticity, right? Is that an authentic thing? This is yeah, but it doesn't look good. So you got to remember that anything that you see on TV or at a theater is exactly that. It is theater, right? So it's cool, it's entertaining, it's fun. But when you think about fighting, and I know we're kind of going off topic a little bit, but when you think about fighting, think about sequences, right? Like if you have to go from A to B, from B to C, C to D, and D to E to get to your move, all those steps, each time you have a link between A and B and C and C, each time you have a link, you have a potential point of failure, right? So that's a problem. The more basic, the more simple it is, the better. Not just because under stress, you can't replicate complex things. Even if you train, it's very hard to replicate complex things. But you have things failing for a number of reasons when you have multiple steps in a process. More steps, more problems, more potential points of failure. So that's the thing about, the films and fight choreography and all this stuff. If it's simple to the point, you'll probably miss it on film unless they do a detail shot where they're zooming in on it and they break it down and they do slow-mo. But short, violent scenes work way better when you look at history in terms of fighting and any type of combatives. These long drawn out sequences, like modern jiu-jitsu is that. They have these sequences that are like 12 steps. That's 12 potential points of failure. And it's too much in a short period when I have this window of exposure that I need to solve a problem in. So, that's a side note, but that's my current pet peeve. So I had to throw that in there.
Oh, no. I did not feel like that was off topic at all. Also, it's your episode. Everything's on topic. You know what I mean?
We're going to talk about heels and beards.
Yes, exactly. That's important. It's important too. And I also think there's so much good information you have to give. I think some topics like that provide a little bit of mental space for the listener to almost digest everything else. So I love that part of podcasting. It's so much fun. And, it creates memories, all that stuff. So something you said, stuck out to me. I do feel like in this industry, because it's so consumer driven, that we do get so focused on the tool and not the actual training. So having the ability to practice hand to hand. And the biggest example I give is in all of my classes when I teach, basic pistol, I spend 5 minutes talking about, wellness and exercise and the ability to control your body and sharpen it as a tool for fighting. Even if that means like knowing how to fall properly if someone comes up and shoves you from an angle, like how to protect your head and things like that they don't really think about. And I always mention, like, a gun is in a rabbit's foot. It doesn't ward off evil. We have to take responsibility for it and, every which way, all the way down to learning how to retain it if someone tries to take it from us. So that's always a big discussion I have with them. And I do that to zoom them out because they get so gear focused. They're like, what holster, what ammo, what class should I take next? And I always try to zoom them out to the big picture. So I appreciate you orienting the discussion around, what can your body do? And then what can your environment contribute? And not just like, I have my black triangle, non-detectable steel, whatever, sharp object, shiv, whatever. And that's going to save my life. It's like everything around it comes first. And anyway, I just really appreciate your input there. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, if the reality is that if you can detect something early, you can leave and not be there when bad things happen. And that saves your life, right? Not a tool. And then, barricading, that saves your life. There's a lot of things that save our lives. And we are all looking for these sexy solutions and the cool thing and the gadget. And like you said, I think what you said is extremely true, which is that everything is based on money and the ability to sell this item. And I'm not speaking specific to any of your sponsors or anybody like that, but the industry as a whole, whether you're talking about protection work or you're talking about fighting or you're talking about, guns or whatever. Everything is a business. And so it comes down to making decisions and giving presentations and coming up with ideology that's consistent with making money. Things that aren't sexy don't sell. That's the truth. It's 2024.
Yeah.
It's the day and age of like a 2-second attention span. I could tell you or show you stuff that is super applicable, that's been time tested, extremely effective. But if it takes me 3 minutes to do it and your attention span is 2 seconds, it's useless. You're never going to digest it. And that's kind of where we're at now. Right. And I've gotten to the point where okay, you don't want to listen. I don't need to tell you. Like it's a very special and different time. And so, the core of the conversation we're talking about is really training your brain. And what you just said is make your brain better by being physically fit. Well, if you're physically fit and you're efficient with blood flow around your body, that means you're carrying or transporting oxygen better and more oxygen, and your brain gets more oxygen. It's making better decisions. So all of this stuff is interconnected, and it translates. And I think we've lost that. We just want to buy the new coolest thing as opposed to do the thing that is available to us to the degree that we need to do it. Like we talked about earlier, you talk about dosage and frequency. Guys want to do stuff and be something that they are not willing to do to be that thing. And so the solution temporarily is to buy that clothing, to buy that gun, to buy that whatever. Even if we're being honest, like you mentioned something just a second ago, that the vast majority of people have never done. Guys that shoot all the time almost never work on retention techniques, almost never. Like even when you talk about police outside of in-service training or at the academy, they're not doing a lot of retention work. And so, how can you expect to be good at something if you don't do it? It doesn't work that way, right? So identifying what's important, giving it a value, like we talked about doing when we talked about risk assessments, how much time and money am I going to put into this? It really should be commensurate with what is most likely to occur, what's most important if it does occur, like loss of life, right? Because if my goal is preservation of life and I'm doing something that's going to lead me in the opposite direction, I probably want to reassess that and change my behavior. And so from my perspective, a lot of the stuff you're saying is in alignment with how we're training. We're training to do a specific thing, get a specific outcome, but it's interwoven, it's holistic, right? So I want the fitness component, I want the mindset component, I want the technical capabilities. And all of that comes back to the same thing, which is basics, simple, fundamental, basic principles and techniques that I can apply in a myriad of circumstances versus one particular circumstance. And again, kind of like the stuff we talked about prior to the start of this, where do I live? What happens where I live? And how am I going to deal with those circumstances when I face them? What do I have available to me? And just thinking through it literally creates that pathway, and most people don't take the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, I think about that all of the time. It's like I don't know if you've heard the term, like my Roman Empire, of concepts. Like there are so many people in this industry that are self-defense focused and they've never done hand-to-hand combatives. They've come from a place of just firearms ownership, and then, they've taken their classes. They can draw from the holster sub-second. That's been a huge topic on this podcast. That's part of why this podcast was created, so that we could bring attention to these topics, and guest speakers like Craig Douglas and others, Chuck Haggard, experts on this matter can come on and help spread that awareness past what I'm able to contribute, because I'm still very early in my journey on it. It's a huge form of accountability because I have to go and train because I talk about these things. I would love to know, what is this is going to be so open. I just want to see where you go with it. What is the biggest difference between the civilian and law enforcement training when it comes to that, when it comes to hand-to-hand and then involvement of a firearm in close quarter situations?
Yeah, so the training for us, most of our training for law enforcement and military focuses heavily on retention techniques, and they requires stress. Like doing retention to learn the technique is great, but you have to do it under stress and see if you can replicate it. And then we start to remove variables, right? So we talked about injuries in fighting, and I have an injury now. And so let's say if I'm carrying appendix and I have a broken left arm, which I kind of do, and I need to like move my garment with my left to draw with my right, that technique doesn't work so well anymore. So now I'm going to have to clear with the same hand that I draw with, like, a thumb hook stroke. So we're going through these things. Like if this happens, you have X, Y, Z, and people will develop something. They'll gravitate toward it, and will develop it relative to the individual. And this is where it changes. So a lot of times when you go through a law enforcement academy or even a military course, they'll teach 1 or 2 or 3 techniques, and it's all geared toward the instructor's capabilities, what he or she is good at, as opposed to a diverse set that you pick what works for you from. And this is, again, if we're talking about my pet peeves, which are many, but this one in particular, when I'm teaching retention techniques, let's say, it's standing, or it's on the ground, or it's in some type of entanglement, or it's in a car, or it's with 2 people or 3 people, or I have a backup weapon as well that I have to deal with, and I have to make a timing decision. So these are really important. But what's equally important is the ability to do something that works specific to you. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're teaching, right? And you're 5'10". Mm-hmm. You're teaching a girl that's 4'11", right? Her arms are not as long as yours. And let's say not only is she 4'11", but let's say, that she's 90 pounds and she's got these really thin limbs and you have thicker limbs, right? That changes what and how you can do things, right? So the limb length, the thickness of it. Let's say you're super athletic and this person you're teaching has no athleticism whatsoever. That changes what they can do. Let's say your mindset is super aggressive and that person you're teaching is super passive. That changes what techniques will work best for them, right? So we do these classes, and when I say we, I mean collectively, not me in particular or you in particular, but we do these classes in law enforcement where they're like check the box courses. Like you come, you do the thing, you get a certificate. And that's complete bullshit, because at the end of the day, if that person can't replicate it under stress, you just entertain them for 8 hours or 40 hours or whatever the length of the course is. And so you have to figure out which techniques will work for that person under stress. So if those techniques work unopposed, like a gunfight, let's say we're talking about guns. If I'm shooting on a flat range with a static target, I'm static, the target's static, my heart rate's low, my blood pressure's low, nothing's shooting back at me, I'm not moving, the thing that's shooting at me is not moving. Like, that's not how most gunfights happen. It's fine to do fam fires and to learn the weapon system and to develop some skills that way at the basic level. That's fine. But it's not getting them ready for reality where there's a bunch of people around, there's women and children and coworkers and there's chaos. And as that's happening, now their gun is concealed. They got to get their gun out of concealment. Maybe it's concealed and it's a level 3 holster. And now they've got this adrenaline dump that they got to deal with. And now the thing that's shooting at them is moving. So, that is a very different scenario than shooting on a flat range where everything's cool and I know everything and it's calm. That's fine for fam fires. But after that, if we're talking about training them for specific things, we have to take them into that zone. And so for teaching, in order to do that, I have to know where they're going to operate, what conditions they're likely to face, what are the laws involved in that, and then what are the mechanisms of survival that I can introduce and that they can do. And then this happens a lot for me with jiu-jitsu or MMA or anything, where what I do, let's say what I do in a jiu-jitsu tournament is not what I would teach law enforcement, because what I'm doing in jiu-jitsu is confined to the system that jiu-jitsu has, the rules and the regulations and what determines if I win or lose or how I gain points or whatever it is, the uniform I'm wearing, the weight class I'm in. It's very defined. So operating within that defined rule set offers me the ability to try to achieve the same or similar game. But in reality, it's a different game. Just like Muay Thai is a different game, wrestling is a different game, boxing is a different game. So I have to start somewhere and then I have to build on it. And this is this is a really big thing right now. Having the ability to toggle between different environments for a law enforcement officer is huge. I have to be able to go to a call and deal with a medical issue, right? I have to be able to go to a call and deal with like a domestic disturbance between a husband and a wife. I have to go to a call and I have to deal with a person that's mentally unstable. Now I have to go to a call and maybe it's an active shooter, or maybe it's not. And I think it is. That's a problem. Now I get, I'm on the SWAT team and I get swatted and they're calling us out to this thing that doesn't even exist. So I have to operate in a lot of different environments and I have to be prepared for that, which means I need more training time, more practice. And the reality is that I'm not going to be good at all of those things because no one is wired to be good at everything, regardless of what some people believe that we know. You're just not. There are things that you're going to be good at and things that you're not going to be good at. So that means more training time for those things you're not. And then now you got to find an instructor who's going to teach you and knows how to teach you in all these diverse subjects, and then is going to specify it to your limb length, your thickness, your mindset, your athletic ability, your whatever. And the truth is we're just pumping people out. And again, collective we, not me and you, but collective we're pumping them out, checking a box, giving them a certificate. That's no good. They're not actually able to replicate that under stress. So this is where I try to dial it back and say, stop worrying about the weapon. Worry about how you think about the situation. Worry about training and getting those reps in, those rounds in. That's the biggest problem that I see right now. When you talk about, for example, firearms instructors who are not doing hand-to-hand combatives, same problem exists with guys who are really good at jiu-jitsu and boxing who are doing nothing with firearms because they think they're going to solve the problems with boxing and jiu-jitsu. It's not real. It's not holistic. It doesn't incorporate when the plan that you have fails, what are you going to do, right? And unfortunately, I hear more of it in the firearms world than I do in the hand-on, like practical application of combatives like jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or boxing or whatever. I just shoot them like, dude, it doesn't work that way. That's disconnected. That's not reality. So your solution is not a viable plan. So again, diatribe, same kind of stuff. My short answer is going to come back to this. Make it simple. Test it with different people in different environments. And if you keep coming back with different results across time, it's probably something you need to change. But if you come with consistent positive results with different people in different conditions with the same techniques, it's a good technique. I'll keep it, right? That's my generic answer and short answer.
Yeah. I've been learning to take more time to respond. My husband cuts out dead space in the episodes. So sometimes I'm like, blah, and I just start like, or recently I've been saying, wow. Like all I say is wow. And it's like, you know what I mean? Right. It is my filler word. I'm also just taken back because I'm not calling you simple or like, your thing's simple, but like it is a simple concept, but that's what we need. We have so many complex systems in place, and to the point where like when people are new to this industry, they feel like there's a huge barrier to entry because they're starting at zero and everyone is seemingly operating at 100. Like we're talking about like being like wearing a plate carrier on the range when really 90% of the time, someone is dressed in civilian clothing. Like what you said is perfect because it is simple. We're starting with the mind and building from that. So anyway, my point is I just appreciate that. That's all I had to say to that and add to that.
I don't take offense at being simple. I actually work to reduce the volume of things I'm doing in fighting. Like I'm literally going backwards, meaning I'm removing stuff so that the core things that I'm doing work in different environments. So a lot of guys like more moves. Like I don't agree with that. For me, to each his own, but for me, it's about simplifying complex things and being able to apply them. Because at the end of the day, my goal is to be able to apply what it is that I'm doing, not to talk about it, not to demonstrate it, not to teach it, but to actually do it in a real world environment. And so I get the training environment's a weird thing, and I'm in it, and I'm partially in it because I'm still doing protective work on a regular basis. I'm still competing in combat sports. I'm still traveling around the world. I still have, a license on the LE side. So when you think about that stuff, most of the people teaching are no longer doing. They're just teaching. And so I think people lose the importance of practical applications, just being able to do it. A simple thing, like if I'm punching and kicking, kneeing, elbowing, what do I need to know? Like, what are the weapons? What are the targets? Like, okay, here's my elbow, that's a weapon. Here's my knee, that's a weapon. Here's my forehead, that's a weapon. Okay, there's the bridge of your nose, there's a target. There's your chin, there's a target. There's your groin, there's a target. And then trying to blend science and art together. So science is, your arm bends this way. Everybody's arm bends that way. Your head turns this way, right? Your nose is made up of cartilage. That's science. And I know that. I know you're going to do certain things, or your body will take certain things, or you can move backwards or forwards or left or right. The art is how I'm tricking you to get you to do the thing I want you to do, and then taking advantage of that to get the outcome that I want, right? So I'm blending art and science constantly, but it's really a simple thing. Like, we make it complex. We intentionally make it complex, I think, many times, because we want to have so much to teach to people. But at the end of the day, you are using blunt force trauma on me when you use your elbow against my head, and you don't have to be super, super knowledgeable about anything. A person who's uneducated, who's unskilled, who has a low IQ can bludgeon somebody with an elbow. Also, pulling a trigger. If you go into any major city in America, any big city, and mine is violence ridden, St. Louis is a whole, so you can take my city as an example. There are all kinds of people who have no training on firearms whatsoever, shooting and killing people. Zero training, because they have to press a trigger. And they don't even have to press trigger. They slap it, they jerk it, they pull it. They have horrible technique, but they're close enough where proximity negates skill, right? And they kill people. And they do it every day. And they're not some type of special operator running around with 75 pounds of kit, training 12 hours a day. They're criminals who are idiots who get access to something. They get close enough to do it, and then they do it. So we act like this is this super top secret special skill. And in reality, people do it every day, whether it's fighting or shooting guns or whatever else. We make it more complex than it needs to be. And if you say to me, you need to dumb it down because you're not very smart. Okay, I'm not very smart. Maybe that's the problem. But I absolutely believe in simplifying things that would otherwise be complex.
Absolutely. In fact, like right before this episode, I was sipping my coffee, scrolling a little bit, and I saw this. And, sorry. And just to paint the picture, I saw this video of an Amazon worker, because I follow all those accounts that just post the most vile things on the internet. And to me, it's like, these are examples of why, like, everything is just such big picture. People are walking disarmed, as far as their awareness. And then like all of a sudden someone comes and jumps and drop kicks them, things like that, to really just like, and of course that can contribute to paranoia, contribute to the availability heuristic, whatnot. But this video, this guy, you can see him pull it, well, it kind of like looks like a Glock 19 out of his Amazon vest, and he's trying to shoot his supervisor. Have you seen this? His supervisor is like sitting 10 feet from him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and he ends up shooting him in the back, but you see him try to pull the trigger, and he's trying to like figure the gun out to pull the trigger, and then the supervisor gets shot in the back and starts running away. Luckily, like, was able to get away. But I mean, he could have been a jiu-jitsu black belt, like, had been carrying on the job, whatever, but his back was to this guy while he was on his computer. That's just like wild to me.
But here's the other part of that. Was the guy that got the shot off, was he a sub-second draw and shoot kind of guy? Did he have the most cool clothing on when he did it? He had none of that stuff. What he had was a guy who wasn't aware of his environment, and then he took advantage of it. So there's two lessons in that, aside from the awareness of the guy that's just staring at the screen, fixated on that, which all of us do. And it's a fight even for me who does this day in and day out, to not look at the phone that's going off, to not look at the thing, to not even answer, to put that on the back burner. And then once I'm in my car and it's locked and nothing's around me, now I can look at it, as opposed to doing it, while I'm walking out of the airport or getting into a car or whatever. But the flip side of that, I think the bigger lesson that most people don't get is that other guy wasn't some special operator that shot him. And he had all kinds of malfunctions, and he was fumbling with that gun in an atrocious way. Clearly, he had less than no firearm skills. It was very obvious. Like, he didn't even, no type of immediate action on the gun when it failed. So this guy with no skills was able to shoot his supervisor in the back, no problem. One or more failures, and he's still able to get that round off without the guy turning around and trying to fight him for the gun. So I think that's a really good example of two sides of the coin, right? When we're running around here in our tactical gear and kit and the new coolest pants with the new coolest hat on, and I got this thing and I'm going to wear this and the gun's going to go here and I got this thing that's going to, okay, that's all great. And it's an industry, and I know a lot of people make money on it, but that's not going to make you a better shot. And maybe you need to pick up that half a second, not on the firing line, but in your awareness skills in your day-to-day life and just picking stuff apart. And that can come down to language skills. That can come down to how you move or who you touch or what you look at. Or, I mean, I think that to me is a bigger lesson right now, because this industry is massive. It is massive. I'm not even, the training industry alone is massive, but like when you get into firearms and you get into combatives training, you get all that stuff. And I'll say, and I know this isn't popular, and I know I'm going to get hate speech for this, but there's, just like martial arts, there are a ton of charlatans, guys who not only don't do it and have never done the thing they're teaching, but they're selling a bill of good to people that are looking for a solution. So you might have to edit out this part of the conversation, but in my 30 years, I have found that is consistently true. It's true more often than it's not. If I'm going to a jiu-jitsu school, a Muay Thai school, if I'm going to a gun course, if I'm going to a course on situational awareness, whatever, you find a ton of people hiding that have never done the thing, right? It's sad but true.
Absolutely.
That's a heavy side there. Did I put a lot of weight on your shoulders?
Oh, no, I love it. I think this is great. It's a good reminder, and it also brings a sense of responsibility to us as the consumers and the students to do our research and ask questions and not just blindly trust every instructor. As someone with the experience you have and that is so detailed with looking into backgrounds, what would you recommend someone do to kind of vet their instructors?
So one thing you just said, before I even get to your question, I really like this. This is really important. You said ask questions, and this is a little bit out of context, but when you're taking a course from somebody who is supposed to be a subject matter expert, you should always be able to question everything they say. So if I tell you something in a course, let's say it's a piece of data, and I say, this is the percentage of this thing occurring, and a student says to me, well, where can I find that? And I go, I told you, that's all you need to know. Like, there's a problem, right? I should be able to say, hey, all you need to go to is the UCR data for this year in this city, and it'll show you, and it'll vary within 1% between St. Louis, Chicago, LA, New York, whatever. I should be able to give you that data. I shouldn't take offense at that, or like, why are you doing that? Like, you're telling me to slingshot it here, but he told me to get a meat hook on it. You should be able to ask instructors questions, and they shouldn't get upset. They should be able to explain it to you, and it should be a simple explanation. If they have to give you a super convoluted, long explanation, it's probably bullshit. And so there are a lot of people that do that. So when it comes to looking at instructors, my first thought is, and I know most guys don't like this, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a very good instructor the other day, and he took it very personally. He didn't say he did, but he did. The first thing that I would do is say, what do I want to do? What is the result that I'm trying to get out of this training? What is that result? And has this instructor done that thing in the real world under stress and been successful. That's my first metric. Then that doesn't mean they're good at instructing something. That just means they were able to do that thing successfully. The next thing is, are they smart enough to understand all the small variables and as well the 30,000 foot view of that thing? And then are they able to break it down into small, digestible, logical, rational pieces that I can understand? And then do they teach in a method that resonates with me individually? So let's say I'm a very visual learner, right? Which most guys are. So I'm a visual learner, and this teacher uses a PowerPoint. They use a lot of videos. They use a lot of photos, and then they do a lot of kinesthetic, like hands-on practical application. That probably resonates more than someone just sitting there giving me a speech for 90 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours. Whereas maybe, and I don't know you, but maybe you are more motivated, or maybe you process information better with auditory methods, right? And so you hearing that and them being very articulate is really important. And then the next thing is the phases, right? Like how they blend together that auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learning. And like, how do they do the chunking methodology? Maybe they don't even use the chunking methodology, whatever, but how do they build those blocks together so that you're moving in this progression forward and you're developing, but you're taking lessons learned and you're chunking on top of each other? If they're doing it in those ways, so first is they have real world experience. They're not a criminal. They're an accredited instructor. They know how to teach. The way they teach works with how I think. And now the next thing that we get to is, can they get me to a point where I'm trying to get to? And do I know people, or can I talk to people that have gone through that process with them who are similar to me? Right? I don't need a guy who's not similar to me saying, yeah, he's great at this thing. I need a guy who is similar to me, who has a similar background or a similar mindset or a similar whatever. And those are the metrics that I would utilize. I don't think, I know this is, again, not really a thing to say in the training circles, but I don't think how popular an instructor is relevant to how good they are. And I think now,
absolutely.
I told somebody this the other day. I was doing a protection detail for a Supreme Court justice in a foreign country, a very violent foreign country. And I'm talking to him, and he was asking me about laws relative to use of force in America, which is in itself really cool, because now you've got a Supreme Court justice who's asking about another foreign nation's force law, because he knows that's the kind of stuff I deal with. And we started talking about it, and he said something to me I hadn't heard before, and it might be a common phrase, but he said something to me, and it was relative to what we're talking about now, which is that, you know, the most famous or best known instructor doesn't make them the best instructor, and it doesn't even make them the best SME. He said to me, Todd, truth is not a matter of majority. Truth is not a matter of majority. Meaning, if 10 million people say this person's the best, it doesn't make them the best, right? And this is really important to understand. And I was talking to another guy about this. I said, look, if we look at data and we say the most visited restaurant on the planet is McDonald's, and the most visited coffee on the planet is Starbucks. That doesn't make McDonald's food good. It doesn't make Starbucks coffee good. In fact, I would argue quite the opposite, right? The masses of the asses, it's horrible stuff. And, you know, you look at it. Truth is not a matter of majority. And this is something to keep in mind when you look at instructors, right? Another thing that I would say when I'm looking for training, if you're going to a training, look for small groups. Small groups. Do not do these massive trainings. Do not do large groups. If you can get into a group that's got 10 people, 12 people or less, you got a group that's 6 people, that's great. I would advocate for that.
Absolutely.
For anybody, any learning style, any experience. Those are the things that I would look for when I look for an instructor and I look for a course to train in. And by the way, just to be clear, I'm still training. I just finished a FLETC use of force instructor course. I got a recert with them. I just finished another assessments course. I mentioned to you the guys that developed the Combat Hunter program in Arcadia Cognerati. Those guys, I've trained with those guys. So I never stop training. 30 years, I'm still a student. I still take jiu-jitsu. I still take Muay Thai courses. just because I do the thing on a professional level doesn't mean I don't need more information. In fact, when I take a class, if I go to a class and I know 95% of what they're teaching, but I learn 5%, it's a win for me. If I spend a week training 40 hours and I walk away with 2 or 3 new ideas or concepts, I'm super happy. That's a win for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always be a student mentality. Yes. Yeah. No, it's lovely to hear. It's incredibly inspiring. It's a good reminder because you are speaking from that perspective as a student and teacher. And you said you're speaking at Byron's event soon. You mentioned that before the episode is.
So Byron Rogers has a Protector Symposium. So he's asked me to come out and speak as somebody that's got 30 years of experience in that realm and has books on that subject matter. And that's going to be now. They moved the dates, but I think it's the very end of August. I want to say like 24th or 25th. And it's at the old Blackwater facility. It's Academy, Constellius, whatever the facility is there at that time. But I don't know Byron's website, but executive protection lifestyle or something along those lines. But Byron Rogers has that going on. So I'm doing those speaking engagements. I got another one coming up before that as well. So, I make no secret of it, but I'm training constantly. So whether it's firearms or jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or assessments or whatever, I constantly go because it changes, it updates, right? I just finished this course and they had changed a couple approaches to something, and it was something that actually benefited my business as well, because the modification that they had made on the governmental side is a modification that we needed to make on the private sector side. And this one group took a bit of a chance in doing this, and it's going to work out really, really well for my clients. So, you're always able to pick up something new or see something new. And the only way that you're not is if you stop training. If you just say, I know everything I need to know, I'm good, which unfortunately is a pretty common mentality in our little sector.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and I feel like a really good theme of this episode is how to be a skeptic almost in this industry, like what to look for. A healthy skeptic. No, for sure. And something I love, I've just recently, I've been going through some training with Lena Michalik, and something she says in every class is that she should have to convince every student that what she says is right, is correct, and is plausible. So like they should, if they have enough support with their support hand, they should be able to counteract the force in the left to right plane kind of thing. They should look for that in practice and not just trust her blindly. And it instills this sense of questioning in them that gets them to figure things out for themselves.
100%. You should be able to question the instructor, and your instructor should be able to provide you with source material. And also, if your instructor's training you on a course of fire, they should be able to demo that with no problem under stress. If you're doing jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or something like that, the instructor should be able to do it against you with resistance. You should question it. You should absolutely question it. In all of these fields, I've been sold a bill of goods more than once. And some of the time, I take it on board and then find out through, real world experience that that's not realistic. That's never going to happen. And the instructor didn't know any better because they didn't have the experience necessary to find out that that's not realistic. So I love that she says that. I'm 100% in support of that. I think any instructor that tells you to question the material they're teaching and to look at it deep and to in fact, what a gift for an instructor if you have a student that comes back and said, I tested and I found these results. This was off and this was off. That's a gift to an instructor. I wouldn't be mad at the person. I'd be like, all right, well, let's go see if that's true. And I would test their test. And then if it comes back that they're right, now I got to modify my training and I have to just suck it up. Do I have an ego? Everybody has an ego. I get it. And the ego drives me on to achieve things. So I achieve a lot of things. But I also know that if I don't check that ego when these things happen, I'm going to pay the price for it. So if I want to be a better instructor, if I want to have material that's more applicable in the real world for my students, I have to update it. That's why I go to training, and I have to listen to students that come back with data that supports, what it is they're saying that's against what I'm teaching. I have to at least consider the idea that I could be wrong. I have to, period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This whole episode has been inspiring and grounding for me personally, and I hope that's the same for the listener. As far as topics covered, I feel like we covered a wide variety and almost like centralized them all with that theme of skepticism and perspectives, and as far as keeping a perspective of like ambition to learn, but also like questioning everything.
You're spot on. I am skeptical of everything. I live in what they call the show me state. So like, don't tell me, show me, prove it. I pressure test everything that I'm doing. And like you said, if you want to call the episode something like how to be a skeptic, or look, keep it simple, keep it basic,
I'll write that
train
down.
it hard, train in a lot of different environments. I think you're right. I think that's the best summary or summation. How to be a skeptic. I'm going to use that from now on. I can teach you how to be a skeptic.
Absolutely. That's the episode title.
Let's do it.
Yes. Be a skeptic with Todd Fox of Tour Protection. I absolutely love that. Something I do with every guest speaker before we sign off is just an opportunity for them to leave a kind of leaving note, piece of advice, even if it's just like, have a good day. Anything you would like to share with the listeners before we take some time for me to read your books, come back for part 2. What would you like to say?
From my side of things, if you can find something or do something where you can incorporate multiple things, like things you mentioned, for example, like if you get into something and it supports your passion's firearms, and you do like combatives like jujitsu or something like that, where it helps you with physical fitness, with managing stress, with all these things, find something that has corollary value. And I think one thing I would recommend to anybody is whatever it is that you do, travel as much as you can and go other places to do it and to test it and to learn new stuff. So I'm at 152 countries operationally. I can go to each of those countries and I can find firearms, or I can find Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu or MMA, or I can find security guys. I think traveling is the real educational gift that I've found in what I'm doing. So my little piece to take away would be, if you have the opportunity and the means to travel, to do what it is that you love, get out of your little space, ideally internationally, but even if it's just to another city, get out, go with a different group of people and get a different perspective and test your theories and learn some new ones. I think that's my suggestion.
I absolutely love that. Yes, I was lucky enough. I don't typically like go on a small rant after this, but I was lucky enough as a kid to travel to other countries. My dad would take us because he wanted us to have that perspective outside of the United States. We're convinced he's like from another planet. So this was his way of being like, look, everyone is different, but the same all at once. He's like, his thing is kind of dark. He's like, everybody eats, has sex, sleeps, he says like all these things. He's like, we all do these core things. We're all pretty much wired the same. And we have like these like core tendencies. He was like, but also, cultures are different, and like not everything is, viewed through one lens. So I was lucky enough to get some of that as a kid, not saying that was all.
What a gift. What a gift. That's awesome. And I think what you just did too, just now, and I agree with your dad 100%. That's a much better way than sitting in a classroom 8-10 hours a day staring at a book. Number one. Number two, what you just did for me is you brought it back around to what I said earlier, which is a blending of science and art, right? Because the science is that physicality, the things that are wired in you, you need to defecate because you need to get the toxins out of your system. You need to have sex so that your lineage continue on. You need to eat so you can survive. But then that social aspect, that area, that region, that culture, whatever, that's the art. So now we're blending science and art. And I think that's a great way to end it. You did a beautiful summation there of the title of the podcast. And then, your dad did a great job of kind of highlighting that point as well. So awesome.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. This has been lovely.
Great
I'm so glad we found each other. Oh yes. Same with you. I cannot wait to read your books. I really wish I had done it before this, but I also, life. And I wanted to, life. And it was just lovely to meet you first. And I know now, like when I'm reading the book, I can refer back to what we talked about. And I'm sure I'll feel silly and be like, oh, I could have asked these amazing questions.
Shoot a note with an address and we'll get some books out to you.
I appreciate you so much. Yes. And look forward to that in a part 2. We may be doing some giveaway stuff. So definitely stay tuned to the listener. Todd, thank you for your time. This has been lovely. When it comes to yes, thank you. Absolutely. If you're listening and you want highlights of this episode, we do highlight reels on TikTok and Instagram. Haven't been banned yet. That's at She Shield Pod. We may have a rebranding coming up soon. That's something that I'm not announcing officially because we're still finalizing some details. But stay tuned for season 2, along with a potential name change, but also still keeping She Shield alive and thriving as far as all of the incredible guest speakers we've had on and everything. All resources mentioned will be available in the show notes, along with all of Todd's books if you want more of him until we have part 2 around. Again, if you liked the podcast, leaving a review helps us so much, so please do that. If you or anyone you know is a firearms owner experiencing a crisis, please keep holdmyguns.org in mind. They are an organization that will connect you with a local gun shop or FFL to store your firearm for you in a time of need. The link to access their website and find a storage location partner is available in the show notes. Thank you for listening. In the meantime, stay safe and stay vigilant. SOG knives began with the mission to reproduce the original SOG Bowie knife used by the Special Ops Unit MACV SOG. Today, SOG knives are carried with confidence into the most demanding situations. Forged out of tradition, hardened in the field, honed for you, whether you're protecting others or leading an epic hunting expedition, tackling one of life's everyday challenges, or facing your most extreme conditions yet, lead the way with SOG. What began as a single commemorative model soon became a full line of innovative tools, field proven by U.S. Special Forces, even honored as the Navy SEAL knife of choice. I've personally carried SOG knives since I added knives to my everyday carry setup, and have yet to be disappointed by their design and durability. Their craftsmanship is rooted in legacy of honor and courage, and is unmatched. With SOG by your side, you are equipped to lead the way, no matter the challenge. Join the ranks of those who dare to push beyond limits and define their own legacy, and use code SHESHIELD to support the pod and to save. That's SHESHIELD at checkout.